This is a Devar Torah on Parshat Masei. Now, this year, because it's a leap year, in Israel, it's being read as a single parsha. In places outside of Israel, it's being read as a second of two parshas, the other one being Matos, which was read last week in Israel. This parsha is, in fact, a culmination of the journeys of the Jewish people throughout the desert. In fact, it opens with a list of the 40 journeys that the people took, starting with the first one was in Egypt, after they were liberated. And there were 49 other journeys once they got out of Egypt. Interestingly enough, even though they took place over 40 years, most of the journeys were taken in a relatively short time in the first 2 years. And for most of the 38 years that that generation had to stay in the desert, so that nobody had been in the men 20 to 60 who had been alive at the time of the sin of the spies was going to still be alive, as they gradually died over the 40-year period. And they only traveled, and for 38 years, they stayed in one place. Now, even though they stayed in one place, they never knew when they were going to have to travel, because it depended on the will of Hashem. Anytime either the pillar of fire at night or the cloud of glory arose, it was time to travel. So even though the people were provided for with man, with eating, they had clothes that grew on them. Hashem made the whole area around the camp temperature controlled. As we'd say today, air conditioned or heat as appropriate. And there are many other miracles. They had a constant supply of water that followed them around. They still had this uncertainty factor. Now, I'm going to have more to say about the meaning of these 40 journeys and why it takes up a fair chunk of this Parshat Masei. After completing the discussion of the 40 journeys, and why the 40 journeys now, because this is the end of the book of Bamidbar Numbers. In the final sefer, it's over the last 5 weeks of Moshe's life, when he is going to be speaking in terms of admonishing the Jewish people, giving them encouragement, and as well as teaching them a lot of other halachas. The 40-year cycle was completed. And in addition, any remaining disputes or issues that had to be worked out were settled then. Then is an appointment of the leaders of each tribe who are going to be responsible for working with Elazar and Yeshua to divide the land once they enter it and conquer it. And it then goes on to discuss the boundaries of Israel. And it's very interesting, besides giving a very detailed description of the boundaries. One of the boundaries is described is the Great Sea, Yam HaGadol. Now, today we call it the Mediterranean. And it also mentions there's some islands attached, some islands off the coast are also part of Eretz Israel. Now, according to the opinion of the majority of the rabbis in the Gemara and Baba Basra, it says that where's the boundary? The beaches, in other words, where the water starts in the Mediterranean, plus a few islands. Rabbi Yehuda gives a very different opinion. He says that it's going to be the entire, when it says the border is the Yam HaGadol, that means our border is the entire Mediterranean. And when it's talking about islands and and adjacent land. It's talking about what we would call today the coast of North Africa and that part of the European coast and the adjoining land, possibly that touches the Mediterranean. In any event, only at the time of Mashiach, when there's the ultimate redemption. We'll see which opinion on that is correct. The Parsha then talks about the fact that there'll be 6 cities of the Levium. Levium were not given one contiguous territory. They were given 48 cities throughout Eretz Israel, and 6 of them were designated as Ori Miklat. Now, the Ori Miklat, or cities of refuge, if somebody negligently killed somebody else, in other words, they weren't lying in ambush for them, as it explains, they weren't planning to kill them, but they were careless. For example, they were climbing down a ladder, they dropped a heavy bag or barrel on somebody and they killed them, or they weren't clear that they were hunting, for example, and they weren't careful. Or another example is they were chopping an axe that wasn't in good condition. The head of it went flying and killed somebody. In all of those situations, the perpetrator had to flee to the city of refuge. He was then taken back for trial where it happened. If he was found to be a deliberate murderer, he was turned over to members of the family to be executed. If he was, in fact, it was negligence or gross negligence, he went back to that city. He had to be there until the Kohen Gadol, who was alive at the time, died. If at the time that he had to go to the Ori Miklat, there was no Kohen Gadol, or he had accidentally killed the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, he can never leave. The Ori Miklat, the city of refuge. Now, we question that here that's brought here, the Gemara and Makos, is why did any particular individual be in a position where he or she had to accidentally kill somebody and then had to flee to the city? Now, in addition, by the way, there were 42 other cities in Levium. They also acted as unofficial Ori Miklat. They were on both sides of the Jordan. And it's explained that it wasn't accidental, that it just happened that the people, it hadn't just happened that the people accidentally killed them. And who were the victims? Why did some poor individual just happen to be, what looks like coincidence, just happen to be walking there at that time? And it's a very important lesson that's drawn in the Gemara. The person who had to flee to the Ori Miklat, city of refuge, had already committed an accidental murder another time, but nobody had seen him do it. Accidental killing. So he was being paid back by having this time to go to the Ori Miklat. Who was his or her victim that they killed? That was somebody who had deliberately murdered another individual, but there were no witnesses and nobody was aware of the identity of the perpetrator. So he or she died in that way. So we see that Hashem is always guiding us, and what looks like there's no such thing as apparent coincidences. Everything has a reason. As we go into Sefer Devarim, the last book of the Bible, Deuteronomy as it's called in English, I will be having more to say about this subject. It's a fascinating topic. The Parsha finishes with a land dispute, so to speak, inheritance dispute. The daughters of Zelophehad, which I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, were 5 daughters of a man who had no sons, who had not died in one of the rebellions like Korach's, but had died for a different sin. Either he picked up sticks on Shabbat so that it could be determined what type of death penalty somebody violating Shabbat was supposed to take, or he was one of the people after the sin of Meraglim, when Moshe said it wasn't time to go into Eretz Israel, They tried anyway and got badly defeated by the Canaanites and the Amalekites. And the protest of the tribe that the 5 daughters of Zelophehad were in was that, well, if they married people outside the tribe, the land would go when they died, their husbands would inherit it. So land would shift from one tribe to another, not the way it was supposed to be divided. Now, what Hashem commanded is to avoid that possibility only for the generation when the land was being conquered and divided, is that they should marry members of their own tribe. In fact, they wound up marrying their cousins, as they described, the sons of their father's brother. And they all made very good matches. Now, just to explain in terms of inheritance, after that first generation, it was no longer a problem. Women were free to marry whoever they wanted to marry. And in terms of inheritance law today, if a woman has property that she comes into marriage with, it remains hers. So the concept of a prenuptial contract is somewhat thousands of years old. In any event, and that completes the Parsha. The subject I'd like to deal with today in more detail is the 42 trips, places that the Jewish people took. Now, on one level, it seems to be a fairly simple listing, but what is the connection with number 42? As explained, that on a deeper level, what's being discussed here is the 42 letter name of God. God has many names. They're all differently describing of various attributes. The other significance of the 42 letter name of God is that if one looks at the first 42 letters of the 5 books of Moses, the Bible, the Chumash, are as follows. Reshit bara Elokim et hashamayim va'aretz, haaretz haya tohu v'bohu. Now, those 2 sentence pasukim verses, or part of verses in the second case, have exactly 42 letters. And it was with the 42 letter name of Hashem that Hashem created the universe. There were 7 days of creation. The actual act of creation was 6 days. And that is the power of that verse. Now, looking at it on another level, the 42 has another significance. When Moshe is being sent by God in Sefer Shmos to go tell the Jewish people that they were going to be liberated, they were going to be free from slavery, and a little later brought out of Egypt, he says, well, they may ask me a name, because every time there was a prophecy, the prophet said in the name of Hashem, one of the names of Hashem. So what happened here was the name he was given, Hashem used, was the name Yeh, which means I shall be. And he tells Moshe, Asher Yeh, Asher Yeh, I shall be that I shall be. According to some sources, it's the whole 3 words is the name of God. But according to the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, Hiyeh is the actual name. Now, that quality of Hiyeh means that Hashem will be with us when we are suffering and we are in time of trouble. Now, that being the case, it's interesting. He said, Hiyeh Asher Hiyeh, I shall be that I shall be. That is what he was telling Moshe. because it was not only at the time of the redemption from Egypt that he would be us in our time of trouble. For future generations, he repeated it to Moshe, but not to the people at the time, because it would have been too hard to hear to be future persecutions. He said, in other words, at all times, in all places, Hashem will be with us in exile. If you look at the Gematria, it's 21. If you take it, both Hashem's presence at that time and helping us during our suffering, and the other time, we again come up to the number 42. Now, the journeys through the desert, which in a way are a reflection, a microcosm of our whole history, each place that we went, we were tested in a different way, because what Hashem was trying to do was perfect us. And in doing so, we were tested in a different way, different quality. Just to give a couple of examples, based on Shir HaShirim Rabbah, Midrashim on Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. He wanted us to be refined and purified in every case. And he gave us tests in every one of those 42 places. For example, when the place where we made the golden calf, the Egel Zahav, we had the power to generate a drive towards idolatry. There was another place, Kivos Hatava, which instilled physical desires. So in each one of these places, we would try to see whether we could resist that temptation. It was supposed to be elevating us. We see another example of this. This is brought by the Balatanya. And even where it seems like a tragic event that had a proper purpose, the people started murmuring against the man. This is right after Aaron died in the 40th year. And Hashem sent fiery serpents and they bit the people. Large multitude of people died. So then what did Hashem tell us? Make a fiery serpent and place it on the pole. So they made a serpent of copper. And anyone who looked at it lived. Now, there was a huge number of people died in that plague. So the question is, what is the positive of that? Because what it was doing was removing the people who were victims of the klipot, the spiritual impurity, and it removed the spiritual impurities from the Jewish people as a whole. When they looked at the snake, that helped them raise to a level where they got rid of the klipos. And that is another example of how it helped us. So by the time we got through the 42 stages to the last one, we're now in this Parsha, the Jewish people have been hopefully perfected, or at least largely purified for their entry into Eretz Israel, which is going to happen after the death of Moshe Rabbeinu. So question is, what lesson is this? What does this help us now? Especially we're in the 3 weeks, the time between Yud Zayin Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, the most tragic day in the Jewish calendar. And there's something very important that should be remembered at this time. The 42, as explained by the Baal Shem Tov, these 42 places reflect the 42 journeys each one of us takes individually. There's 42 stages to our life. The Baal Shem Tov elaborates, and it's beyond the scope of this Devar Torah, but it elaborates them. And each one of those is an experience for growth. It's a time of helping us and get through our life to achieve our potential. And on another level, it explains what is Hashem doing. It says Yeh was his name. he shall be. And what God does during the exiles we've been in. We've been in exile majority of our history. The last one is going close to 2,000 years since the Second Temple was destroyed and we were exiled by the Romans. And it explains that what Hashem is doing as we go through the nations and get exposed to the klipot, the various spiritual impurities. Hashem is elevating us and helping us out of that situation. But that will only happen when we work on ourselves. Hashem, of course, could do that without us, but he's trying to get all of us involved in being his partners, and therefore he limits his power so that we can play a role in the elevate ourselves in the world till we merit the ultimate redemption. And even though we are now living through a very dark period of the year, with all this in mind, may we work on ourselves, all take our journeys of these 42 steps and merit the man of Mashiach, and may this be the last Seder Tisha B'Av, and may we be at the Third Temple next year. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.